Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Guards! Guards! By Terry Pratchett. Part 11. Sergeant Colin winced. Ow! Don't be a big softy, said Lady Ramkin cheerfully, tightening the bandage with a well-practiced skill handed down through many generations of Ramkin womenfolk. He hardly touched you. And he's very sorry, said Carrot sharply. Show the sergeant how sorry you are. Go on. Walk, said the librarian sheepishly. Don't let him kiss me, squeaked Colin. Do you think picking someone up by their ankles and bouncing their head on the floor comes under the heading of striking a superior officer? Said Carrot. I'm not pressing charges, me, said the sergeant hurriedly. Can we get on? Said Vimes impatiently. We're going to see if Errol can sniff out the dragon's lair. Lady Ramkin thinks it's got to be worth a try. You mean set a deep hole with spring-loaded sides, tripwires, whirling knife blades driven by water power, broken glass and scorpions to catch a thief, Captain? Said the sergeant doubtfully. Ow! Yes, we don't want to lose the scent, said Lady Ramkin. Stop being a big baby, Sergeant. Brilliant idea about using Errol, ma'am, if I may make so bold, said Nobby, while the sergeant blushed under his bandage. Vimes was not certain how long he would be able to put up with Nobby, the social mountaineer. Carrot said nothing. He was gradually coming to terms with the fact that he probably wasn't a dwarf, but dwarf blood flowed in his veins, in accordance with the famous principle of morphic resonance, and his borrowed genes were telling him that nothing was going to be that simple. Finding a horde, even when the dragon wasn't at home, was pretty risky. Anyway, he was certain he'd know if there was one around. The presence of large amounts of gold always made a dwarf's palms itch. And his weren't itching. We'll start by that wall in the shades, said the captain. Sergeant Colin glanced sideways at Lady Ramkin and found it impossible to show cowardice in the face of the supportive. He contented himself with, Is that wise, Captain? Of course it isn't. If we were wise, we wouldn't be in the watch. I say, all this is tremendously exciting, said Lady Ramkin. Oh, I don't think you should come, milady, Vimes began. Sybil, please. It's a very disreputable area, you see. But I'm sure I shall be perfectly safe with your men, she said. I'm sure vagabonds just melt away when they see you. That's dragons, thought Vimes. They melt away when they see dragons and just leave their shadows on the wall. Whenever he felt that he was slowing down or that he was losing interest, he remembered those shadows, and it was like having dull fire poured down his backbone. Things like that shouldn't be allowed to happen. Not in my city. In fact, the shades were not a problem. Many of its denizens were out horde hunting anyway, and those that remained were far less inclined than hitherto to lurk in dark alleys. Besides, the more sensible of them recognized that Lady Ramkin, if waylaid, would probably tell them to pull up their socks and not be silly, in a voice so used to command that they would probably find themselves doing it. The wall hadn't been knocked down yet, and still bore its grisly fresco. Errol sniffed around it, trotted up the alley once or twice, and went to sleep. "Didn't work," said Sergeant Colin. "Good idea, though," said Nobby loyally. "It could be all the rain and people walking about, I suppose," said Lady Ramkin. Vimes scooped up the dragon. It had been a vain hope anyway. It was just better to be doing something than nothing. "We'd better get back," he said. "The sun's gone down." They walked back in silence. The dragons even tamed the shades, Vimes thought. It's taken over the whole city, even when it isn't here. People start tying virgins to rocks. People will start tying virgins to rocks any day now. It's a metaphor of human bloody existence. A dragon. And if that wasn't bad enough, it's also a bloody great hot flying thing. He pulled out the key to the new headquarters. While he was fumbling in the lock, Errol woke up and started to yammer. "Not now," Vimes said. His side twinged. The night had barely started, and already he felt too tired. A slate slid down the roof and smashed on the cobbles beside him. "Captain!" hissed Sergeant Colin. "What?" "It's on the roof, Captain." Something about the sergeant's voice got through to Vimes. It wasn't excited. It wasn't frightened. It just had a tone of dull, leaden terror. He looked up. Errol started to bounce up and down under his arm. The dragon was peering down interestedly over the guttering. Its face alone was taller than a man. Its eyes were the size of very large eyes, colored a smoldering red and filled with an intelligence that had nothing to do with human beings. It was far older, for one thing. It was an intelligence that had already been long basted in guile and marinated in cunning by the time a group of almost monkeys were wondering whether standing on two legs was a good career move. It wasn't an intelligence that had any truck with, or even understood the arts of diplomacy. It wouldn't play with you, or ask you riddles, but it understood all about arrogance and power and cruelty, and if it could possibly manage it, it would burn your head off, because it liked to. It was even more angry than usual at the moment. It could sense something behind its eyes, a tiny, weak, alien mind bloated with self-satisfaction. It was infuriating, like an unscratchable itch. It was making it do things it didn't want to do, and stopping it from doing things it wanted to do very much. Those eyes were, for the moment, focused on Errol, who was going frantic. Vimes realized that all that stood between him and 1,000,000 degrees of heat was the dragon's vague interest in why Vimes had a smaller dragon under his arm. "Don't make any sudden moves," said Lady Ramkin's voice behind him. "And don't show fear. They can always tell when you're afraid." "Is there any other advice you can offer at this time?" said Vimes slowly, trying to speak without moving his lips. Well, tickling them behind their ears often works. Oh, said Vimes weakly. And a good sharp no, and taking away their food bowl. Ah, and hitting them on the nose with a roll of paper is what I do in extreme cases. In the slow, brightly outlined, desperate world Vimes was now inhabiting, which seemed to revolve around the craggy nostrils a few meters away from him, he became aware of a gentle, hissing sound. The dragon was taking a deep breath. The intake of air stopped. Vimes looked into the darkness of the flame ducts and wondered whether he'd see anything, whether there'd be some tiny white glow or something before fiery oblivion swept over him. At that moment, a horn rang out. The dragon raised its head in a puzzled way and made a noise that sounded vaguely interrogative without being in any way a word. The horn rang out again. The noise seemed to have a number of echoes that lived a life of their own. It sounded like a challenge. If that wasn't what it was, then the horn blower was soon going to be in big trouble, because the dragon gave Vimes a smoldering look, unfolded its enormous wings, leapt heavily into the air and, against all the rules of aeronautics, flew slowly away in the direction of the sound. Nothing in the world should have been able to fly like that. The wings thumped up and down with a noise like potted thunder, but the dragon moved as though it was idly sculling through the air. If it stopped flapping, the movement suggested it would simply glide to a halt. It floated, not flew. For something the size of a barn with an armor-plated hide, it was a pretty good trick. It passed over their heads like a barge, heading for the Plaza of Broken Moons. "Follow it!" shouted Lady Ramkin. "That's not right. It flying like that? I'm pretty sure there's something in one of the witchcraft laws," said Carrot, taking out his notebook. "And it's damaged the roof. It's really piling up the offences, you know." "You all right, Captain?" said Sergeant Colin. "I could see right up its nose," said Captain Vimes dreamily, his eyes focused on the worried face of the sergeant. "Where's it gone?" he demanded. Colin pointed along the street. Vimes glowered at the shape disappearing over the rooftops. "Follow it," he said. The horn sounded again. Other people were hurrying towards the plaza. The dragon drifted ahead of them like a shark, heading towards a wayward airbed, its tail flicking slowly from side to side. "Soon, some loony is going to fight it," said Nobby. "I thought someone would have a go," said Colin. "Poor bugger will be baked in his own armor." This seemed to be the opinion of the crowds lining the plaza. The people of Ankh-Morpork had a straightforward, no-nonsense approach to entertainment, and while they were looking forward to seeing a dragon slain, they'd be happy to settle instead for seeing someone being baked alive in his own armor. You didn't get the chance every day to see someone baked alive in their own armor. It would be something for the children to remember. Vimes was jostled and bounced around by the crowd as more people flooded into the plaza behind them. The horn sounded a third challenge. "That's a slug horn, that is," said Colin knowledgeably. "Like a tocsin, only deeper." You sure? Said Nobby. Yep. It must have been a bloody big slug. Peanuts, figgins, hot sausages, whined a voice behind them. Hello, lads. Hello, Captain Vimes. In at the death, eh? Have a sausage on the house. What's going on, Throat? Said Vimes, clinging to the vendor's tray as more people spilled around them. Some kids ridden into the city and said he'd kill the dragon, said Cut Me Own Throat. Got a magic sword, he says. Has he got a magic skin? You've got no romance in your soul, Captain, said Throat, removing a very hot toasting fork from the tiny frying pan on his tray and applying it gently to the buttock of a large woman in front of him. Stand aside, madam. Commerce is the lifeblood of the city. Thank you very much. Of course, he continued, by right there should be a maiden chained to a rock. Only the aunt said no. That's the trouble with some people. No sense of tradition. This lad says he's the rightful heir, too. Vimes shook his head. The world was definitely going mad around him. You've lost me there, he said. Heir, said Throat patiently. You know, heir to the throne. What throne? The throne of Ankh. What throne of Ankh? You know, kings in that. Throat looked reflective. Wish I knew what his bloody name is, he said. I put an order in to Ingenious the Trolls all night, wholesale pottery for 3 gross of coronation mugs, and it's going to be a right pain painting all the names in afterwards. Shall I put you down for a couple, Captain? To you, 90 pence, and that's cutting me own throat. Vimes gave up and shoved his way back through the throng, using Carrot as a lighthouse. The lance constable loomed over the crowd, and the rest of the rank had anchored themselves to him. It's all gone mad, he shouted. What's going on, Carrot? There's a lad on a horse in the middle of the plaza, said Carrot. He's got a glittering sword, you know. Doesn't seem to be doing much at the moment, though. Vimes fought his way into the lee of Lady Ramkin. Kings, he panted, of Ankh and thrones are there. What? Oh, yes, there used to be, said Lady Ramkin, hundreds of years ago. Why? Some kid says he's heir to the throne. That's right, said Throat, who'd followed Vimes in the hope of clinching a sale. He made a big speech about how he was going to kill the dragon, overthrow the usurpers, and right all wrongs. Everyone cheered. Hot sausage, 2 for $1, made of genuine pig. Why not buy one for the lady? Don't you mean pork, sir? Said Carrot warily, eyeing the glistening tubes. Manner of speaking, said Throat quickly. Certainly your actual pig products, genuine pig. Everyone cheers any speech in this city, growled Vimes. It doesn't mean anything. Get your pig sausages, 5 for $2, said Throat, who never let a conversation stand in the way of a trade. Could be good for business, could monarchy. Pig sausages in a bun, and righting all the wrongs too. Sounds like a solid idea to me. With onions. Can I press you to a hot sausage, ma'am? Said Nobby. Lady Ramkin looked at the tray around Throat's neck. Thousands of years of good breeding came to her aid, and there was only the faintest suggestion of horror in her voice when she said, "My, they look good. What splendid foodstuffs." "Are they made by monks on some mystic mountain?" said Carrot. Throat gave him an odd look. "No," he said patiently. "By pigs." "What wrongs?" said Vimes urgently. "Come on, tell me. What wrongs is he going to right?" "Well," said Throat, there's taxes. That's wrong for a start." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Paying taxes was something that, in Throat's world, happened only to other people. "That's right," said an old woman next to him. "In the gutter of my house leaks something dreadful, and the landlord won't do nothing. That's wrong." "And premature baldness," said the man in front of her. "That's wrong too." Vimes's mouth dropped open. "Ah, kings can cure that, you know," said another proto-monarchist knowingly. "As a matter of fact," said Throat, rummaging in his pack, "I've got one bottle left of this astonishing ointment. What is made," he glared at Carrot, "by some ancient monks who live on a mountain." "And they can't answer back, you know," the monarchist went on. "That's how you can tell they're royal. Completely incapable of it. It's to do with being gracious." "Fancy," said the leaky, guttering woman. "Money too," said the monarchist, enjoying the attention. "They don't carry it. That's how you can always tell a king." "Why, it's not that heavy," said the man whose remaining hair was spread across the dome of his head like a remnant of a defeated army. "I can carry hundreds of dollars, no problem." You probably get weak arms being a king," said the woman wisely. "Probably with the waving." "I've always thought," said the monarchist, pulling out a pipe and beginning to fill it with the ponderous air of one who is going to deliver a lecture, "that one of the major problems of being a king is the risk of your daughter getting a prick." There was a thoughtful pause. "And falling asleep for 100 years, the monarchist went on sturdily. "Ah," said the others, unaccountably relieved. "And then there's wear and tear on peas," he added. "Well, there would be," said the woman uncertainly. "Having to sleep on them all the time," said the monarchist. "Not to mention hundreds of mattresses." "Right." "Is that so? I think I could get him for him wholesale," said Throat. He turned to Vimes, who had been listening to all this with a leaden depression. "See, Captain? And you'd be in the Royal Guard, I expect. Get some plumes in your helmet." "Ah, pageantry," said the monarchist, pointing with his pipe. "Very important. Lots of spectacles." "What, free?" said Throat. "Well, I think maybe you have to pay for the frames," said the monarchist. "You're all bloody mad," shouted Vimes. "You don't know anything about him, and he hasn't even won yet." "Bit of a formality, I expect," said the woman. "It's a fire-breathing dragon!" screamed Vimes, remembering those nostrils. "And he's just a guy on a horse, for heaven's sake!" Throat prodded him gently in the breastplate. "You got no soul, Captain," he said. when a stranger comes into the city under the thrall of the dragon and challenges it with a glittering sword, well, there's only one outcome, ain't there? It's probably destiny. Thrall! Shouted Vimes. Thrall! You thieving bugger throat! You were flogging cuddly dragon dolls yesterday! That was just business, Captain. No need to get excited about it, said Throat pleasantly. Vimes went back to the rank in a gloomy rage. Say what you liked about the people of Ankh-Morpork. They had always been staunchly independent, yielding to no man their right to rob, defraud, embezzle, and murder on an equal basis. This seemed absolutely right to Vimes's way of thinking. There was no difference at all between the richest man and the poorest beggar, apart from the fact that the former had lots of money, food, power, fine clothes, and good health. But at least he wasn't any better, just richer, fatter, more powerful, better dressed, and healthier. It had been like that for hundreds of years. And now they get one sniff of an ermine robe and they go all gooey, he muttered. The dragon was circling the plaza slowly and warily. Vimes craned to see over the heads in front of him. In the same way that various predators have the silhouette of their prey almost programmed into their genes, it was possible that the shape of someone on a horse holding a sword clicked a few tumblers in a dragon's brain. It was showing keen but wary interest. Back in the crowd, Vimes shrugged. I didn't even know we were a kingdom. Well, we haven't been for ages, said Lady Ramkin. The kings got thrown out, and jolly good job too. They could be quite frightful. But you're, well, from a high-born family, he said. I should have thought you'd be all for kings. Some of them were fearful oiks, you know, she said airily. Wives all over the place, and chopping people's heads off, fighting pointless wars, eating with their knife, chucking half-eaten chicken legs over their shoulders, that sort of thing. Not our sort of people at all. The plaza went quiet. The dragon had flapped slowly to the far end and was almost stationary in the air, apart from the slow beating of its wings. Vimes felt something crawl. Vimes felt something claw gently at his back, and then Errol was on his shoulder, gripping with its hind claws. His stubby wings were beating in time with those of the bigger specimen. He was hissing. His eyes were fixed on the hovering bulk. The boy's horse jigged nervously on the plaza's flagstones as he dismounted, flourished the sword, and turned to face the distant enemy. He certainly looks confident, Vimes told himself. On the other hand, how does the ability to slay dragons fit you for kingship in this day and age? It was certainly a very shiny sword. You had to admit that. And now it was 2 of the clock the following morning, and all was well, apart from the rain. It was drizzling again. There are some towns in the multiverse which think they know how to have a good time. Places like New Orleans and Rio reckon they not only know how to push the boat out, but set fire to the harbor as well. But compared to Ankh-Morpork, with its hair down, they are a Welsh village at 2 p.m. on a wet Sunday afternoon. Fireworks banged and sparkled in the damp air over the turbid mud of the River Ankh. Various domesticated animals were being roasted in the streets. Dancers congad from house to house, often managed to pick up any loose ornaments while doing so. There was a lot of quaffing going on. People who in normal circumstances would never think of doing it were shouting, "Hurrah!" Vimes stalked gloomily through the crowded streets, feeling like the only pickled onion in a fruit salad. He'd given the rank the evening off. He wasn't feeling at all royalist. He didn't think he had anything against kings as such. But the sight of Ankh-Morporkians waving flags was mysteriously upsetting. That was something only silly, subject people did in other countries. Besides, the idea of royal plumes in his hat revolted him. He'd always had a thing about plumes. Plumes sort of, bought you off, told everyone that you didn't belong to yourself, and he'd feel like a bird. It'd be the last straw. His errant feet led him back to the yard. After all, where else was there? His lodgings were depressing, and his landlady had complained about the holes which, despite more shouting, Errol kept making in the carpet. And the smell Errol made. And Vimes couldn't drink in a tavern tonight without seeing things that would upset him even more than the things he normally saw when he was drunk. It was nice and quiet, although the distant sounds of revelry could be heard through the window. Errol scrambled down from his shoulder and started to eat the coke in the fireplace. Vimes sat back and put his feet up. What a day and what a fight! The dodging, the weaving, the shouts of the crowd, the young man standing there looking tiny and unprotected, the dragon taking a deep breath in a way now very familiar to Vimes. And not flaming. That had surprised Vimes. It had surprised the crowd. It had certainly surprised the dragon, which had tried to squint at its own nose and clawed desperately at its flame ducts. It had remained surprised right up to the moment when the lad ducked in under one claw and thrust the sword home. And then a thunderclap. You'd have thought there'd have been some bits of dragon left, really. Vimes pulled a scrap of paper towards him. He looked at the notes he'd made yesterday. Item: heavy dragon, but yet it can fly right well. Item: the fire be main hot, yet issueth from unliving thing. Item: the swamp dragons be right poor thingies, yet this monstrous form waxeth full mightily. Item: from whence it cometh none know, nor whither it goeth, nor where it biddeth between times. Item: why did it burneth so neatly? He pulled the pen and ink towards him, and in a slow, round hand added, Item: can a dragon be destroyed into utterly no thing? He thought for a while and continued, Item: Why did it explode that none may find it? Search they greatly? A puzzler, that. Lady Ramkin said that when a swamp dragon exploded, there was dragon everywhere. And this one had been a damn great thing. Admittedly, its insides must have been an alchemical nightmare, but the citizens of Ankh-Morpork should still have been spending the night shoveling dragon off the streets. No one seemed to have bothered about this. The purple smoke was quite impressive, though. Errol finished off the coke and started on the fire irons. So far this evening, he had eaten 3 cobblestones, a doorknob, something unidentifiable he'd found in the gutter, and, to general astonishment, 3 of cut-me-own throat sausages made of genuine pork organs. Coke, a solid fuel made by heating coal in the absence of air so that the volatile components are driven off. Coke. Vimes stared at the paper again and then wrote, Item. How can kings come of nothing? He hadn't even seen the lad close to. He looked personable enough. Not exactly a great thinker, but definitely the kind of profile you wouldn't mind seeing on your small change. Mind you, after killing the dragon, he could have been a cross-eyed goblin for all that it mattered. The mob had borne him in triumph to the patrician's palace. Lord Veterinary had been locked up in his own dungeons. He hadn't put up much fight, apparently, just smiled at everyone and went quietly. What a happy coincidence for the city that, just when it needed a champion to kill the dragon, a king came forth. Vimes turned this thought over for a while. Then he turned it back to front. He picked up the quill and wrote, Item. What a happy chance it be for a lad that would be king, that there be a dragon to slow, to prove beyond doubt his honey fides. It was a lot better than birthmarks and swords, that was for sure. He twiddled the quill for a while, and then doodled. Item. The dragon was not a mechanical device, yet surety no wizard has the power to create a beast of that maginite size. Item. Why, in the pinch, could it not flame? Item. Where did it come from? Item. Where did it go? The rain poured harder on the window. The sound of celebration became distinctly damp, and then faded completely. There was a murmur of thunder. Vimes underlined "go" several times. After further consideration, he added 2 more question marks. After staring at the effect for some time, he rolled the paper into a ball and threw it into the fireplace, where it was fielded and swallowed by Errol. There had been a crime. Senses Vimes didn't know he possessed. Ancient policeman senses prickled the hairs on his neck and told him there had been a crime. It was probably such an odd crime that it didn't figure anywhere in Carrots' book. But it had been committed all right. A handful of high-temperature murders was only the start of it. He'd find it and give it a name. Then he stood up, took his leather rain cape from its hook behind the door, and stepped out into the naked city. This is where the dragons went. they lie. Not dead, not asleep, not waiting, because waiting implies expectation. Possibly, the word we're looking for here is angry. It could remember the feel of real air under its wings, and the sheer pleasure of the flame. There had been empty skies above, and uninteresting world below, full of strange running creatures. Existence had a different texture there, a better texture. And just when it was beginning to enjoy it, it had been crippled, stopped from flaming, and whipped back like some hairy canine mammal. The world had been taken away from it. In the reptilian synapses of the dragon's mind, the suggestion was kindled that, just possibly, it could get the world back. It had been summoned and disdainfully banished again. But perhaps there was a trail, a scent, a thread which would lead it to the sky. Perhaps there was a pathway of thought itself. It recalled to mind the peevish voice, so full of its own diminutive importance, a mind almost like that of a dragon, but on a tiny scale. Aha! It stretched its wings